As it stands right now, the County Board of Legislators is deciding on bids to privatize the airport. And they have a public hearing coming up this Thursday night about the master plan that was presented by the administration. The master plan of the airport does not take into account the legal restrictions, and they are legal restrictions that have been agreed upon between the industry and the federal government and the county government stretching back over 30 years. So that master plan is the fundamental footprint upon which any discussion of whether or not there should be privatization should take place. And I think, my judgment, personal opinion, the master plan is fatally flawed, and you have to go back to the drawing board. You cannot assume that you have authority to do things, and you project ahead, there's this much demand. Well, if we had the Wild Wild West, we just let everything go, yes, that kind of demand would drive it. And I think the question that you pose here that we all have to ask ourselves is, what is the purpose of a publicly owned facility? And is the purpose to make the maximum amount of revenue possible? I served 20 years in the private sector. My job was to do, in the end of my career, I started out as a kid making sales calls as a sales manager, but my job was to analyze the revenue stream of a potential hotel, determine whether or not it could generate the money necessary to warrant the investment in the hotel. And that we would hang on to that as an analysis of market conditions and a host of other things. And I had a fiduciary responsibility, and the fiduciary responsibility was to say accurately if it was profitable and to back it up factually and so forth. Nowhere in that responsibility, did I make a moral judgment as to whether the hotel should be in this location, is this the right use of the land? That was irrelevant. Those decisions were being made by the guy who owned the land and for which my responsibility within my corporation. In the public domain, we have a completely different responsibility. We have to think about the Anthony Tissos of the world, not just how much money can be made in its maximum capacity. And Mr. Tisso, you're not the only person, and there's many other people who look at this with that thought in mind. Now, the biggest problem in Westchester County is that not everybody uses the airport, not everybody uses playland, in the same way that I said earlier on, not everybody gets on the bus system. And so the question is, are we going to divide the county in a way where we say, hey, you don't get on the bus system, what do you care what we do to the buses? You don't live near the airport, what do you care what we do to the airport? If I can save you a couple pennies, that's good enough public policy. But it's not good enough public policy. And I would argue, and I think I did this when I was in the county legislature, the agreements that were made back in the 1980s, they were made under a Republican county executive, Andy O'Rourke. It was done to settle a lawsuit, and it was done with a long-term vision in mind of maintaining the airport, modernizing the airport, but keeping its framework at a certain level. Because if you let the market drive it, it's going to drive it to a much higher level. You can call LaGuardia North if you want, and you could have Westchester, I-287 could become the Cross Bronx Parkway North if you just let market drive it. And then the question you ask yourself as a public official, is letting the market drive it a maximum amount of money that we can use right now here, is that what our public responsibilities are? And I would agree with you, that is not our public responsibility. We need to have an airport, and we need to control its development to make sure that it doesn't become an octopus that strangles the very community that it's in.